All right, let's talk about the problems that were graded from 8-7. The problems Mr. Jones and I selected were 2, 7, 21, 23, and 31. Each problem is worth 20 points. The work that matches the answer is 10 points, and the correct answer is 10 points. So let's go ahead and start with, number 2. So I have 3g squared plus 8g plus 4. I multiply 3 times 4 to give me a factor of 12. My sum has to be 8. So I worked through, and I found that 6 and 2 meet the criteria, where I multiply 6 times 2, which is 12, and it gives me a sum of 8. So then I group the 6 over here with a 3a, because it looks like I'm factor something in common with those. The same thing with the 2. I keep saying a. That's a g. 2g. My bad. Okay. So then I factor out 3g from the first quantity, 2 from the second quantity. And that leaves me with 2 quantities that are the same. G plus 2, in parentheses, 3g plus 2. And that is your final answer. The directions for this middle part were to factor only. Factor only. Okay, let's look at number 7. We're still just factoring 6a squared minus 17a plus 2. Multiply this 6 times this 12, which gives me 72. And I have to get a sum or combination to give me negative 17. So I kind of worked through this, and I wrote down several answers just to kind of show you, if you don't see it right away, just start with what you know. Start with whichever number you think it is. And I came up with finally negative 8 and negative 9. Negative 8 times negative 9 gives me positive 72. Negative 8 combined with negative 9 gives me negative 17. So let's look at the work. So I brought down the 6g squared and then the 12, and I just decided to group the negative 9. Am I calling this a g? Lord have mercy, this is an a. All right, negative 9a and negative 8a, I put those in and then I group them. Then I need a factor from the first quantity. I can factor out a 3a. And that leaves me with 2a minus 3. Factor out negative 4, I get 2a minus 3. So when I factor both of those out, those quantities that they have the same, my answer is 2a minus 3 times 3a minus 4. Here's 21. This time I need to do what I did in the previous work, but I need to solve. I need to get the answers. So on this one, this is number 21, and I believe the problem is Q, not G, but I changed everything to a G for some reason, so that's what we're going to work with. So I need to figure out, if I multiply these together, factor of 24, combination of negative 10. I get negative 4 and negative 6. So I group this, negative 4 with the 8g, the negative 6 with the 3. I apologize if I just called variables different variables. The work is right. The variables I used are right, except for this one with a v. I should have had a v instead of a g. But hopefully everything matches. So now, once I factor those two that they have in common, the 2g, I can factor out, minus 1, I can factor out a 4g. The second one, I can factor out a negative 3. So then I'm left with, they have 2g minus 1 in common. I write 2g minus 1. What's left over, I put in the second quantity. Okay, but you're not done yet. You have to solve the problem. It has equal to 0, so we need to solve the problem. So I'm going to break these up into two equations, and I get 2g minus 1 equals 4a minus 3. They both are set equal to 0. So then we've got two-step equations, which you know. And when I solve, I get my first answer to be 1/2. and the second one to be 3/4. So I have g equals 1/2, and it can also be 3/4. This is what you could substitute into the equation to make it true. Okay, let's look at the next problem. Number 23, 10r squared minus 21r equals negative 4r plus 6. So I just kind of wanted to let you know, when we had our hangout session, I didn't have a lot of people join, but the hangout session is like tutorials. A couple people asked me for specific problems to work out. 23 was one of them. So there were just a few of you that were able to do this with me and got the work and the correct answer. So kudos to you. Everyone else, let me explain. So I have to have where this side equals 0, but it doesn't. I've got a negative 4r plus 6. So I'm going to move the negative 4r over. That gives me positive 4, what is it? Negative 17r. I still haven't set this equal to 0. I move the minus 6 over. And that leaves me with 10r squared minus 17r minus 6. So I'm going to multiply 10 and negative 6 to give me my factor of negative 60. And it needs to be a sum of negative 17. So when I combine these, it does give me 17. So I've got negative 20 and 3. Here's how I had to split them up. And notice that these two numbers should combine to give you this center term. I'm sure many of you picked up on that, but just in case. So then I factor out a 10r from the first quantity. I'm left with r minus 2. I factor out a positive 3 from the second quantity. I'm left with r minus 2. And notice they have two quantities that are the same. So I'm going to come back over here now, and I'm going to pull out what they have, like just kind of group it. So I have r minus 2, 10r plus 3. Those are my factors. Set it equal to 0. I'm not done because I've got to solve. So let's go ahead and solve. So I separate those into two equations. So I have r minus 2 equals 0 and 10r plus 3 equals 0. If you'll notice on these problems that this is stuff that you've learned in different pieces at different times, and you're putting it all together to solve one problem, putting what you know. So when I solve, I get r equals 2, and then r equals negative 3 over 10. So your final answer should be 2 and negative 3/10. So that's what we do for 23. So let's look at 31. Don't just ignore the word problems. They are problems you need to learn how to do. Take what you've learned from the lesson and apply it. Lauren dove into a swimming pool from 15 feet high from a 15-foot high diving board with an initial upward velocity of 8 feet per second. Find the time t in seconds it took Lauren to enter the water. Use the model for vertical motion, science, given by the equation h equals negative 16 2 squared plus vt plus s. And you're thinking, what? There's a lot of variables in that problem. But they tell us the information in the problem, what we need. Okay, where h is the height in feet, t is the time in seconds, v is the initial upward velocity in feet per second, and s is the initial height in feet per second, in feet. And then they give us a little hint. Let h equals 0 represent the surface of the pool. Well, let me show you how I solved this problem and how I approached it. So here's the equation that they give me in the problem. They also give me what the variables represent in the problem. H represents the height, the surface of the pool, which is 0. All this is given. T is time in seconds. They're asking me to find that. V is initial velocity, which is 8. S is the initial height, which is 15. You've got to learn how to write down the information. Don't just stare at it and say, I don't get it. You got to learn to read the problem and sort out what you need. Now let's go to the work. All right, here we go. So I'm going to substitute the values they gave me. H is 0. Let's write down 0. Negative 16t squared. We don't know what t is. Plus, v is the initial velocity, which is 8. And then T, we don't know, so we just bring that down. And we know that S is 15. All of this was given in the problem. So what we need to do now is we need to solve the problem just like we did before. So I'm going to multiply negative 16 times 15 to figure out what that factor is, and it has, give me a sum of AT. So I brought down the negative 16t squared, and I've separated the 15 to the end. My factor was negative 240. 20 times negative 2 gives me negative 240, and when it combines, it gives me 8. So now let's go ahead and write these into the problem. So then I have negative 16 squared minus 12t, and then I have positive 8t plus 15. Now we need to group them. Okay, now let's factor out from the first one. So the first one I factor, and I can factor out a negative 4t. And then I have 4t plus 3. I factor out a 5, and that gives me 4t plus 3. And all of this is set equal to 0. Pull out the I forgot a t in here. Pull out the common quantity, 4t plus 3 times negative 4t plus 5 set equals to 0. Separate the equations, and then I'm going to set them both equal to 0, and then I'm going to solve. So for the first value of t, it's negative 3/4. Now let's look at the second value of t. So I've solved for the other t, which is 5 over 4, or 5/4, which equals 1 and 25 hundredths. So I got both of these as answers for many of you. The correct answer is not both of them. You didn't take it that step further to go back and read the problem and answer. The problem asks for time. You cannot have a negative time. So this answer is not the solution. The only answer that is possible for the time is 1 and 25 hundredths seconds. That's your final answer. If I messed up on any variables, I'm sorry. I just don't know why I do it. I'm looking at it. I'm writing it down, but I just don't say them right. I apologize. If you have any other questions, let me know. My next tutorial session is Wednesday from 1:35 to 2:05. Please come if you don't know. I will work out some problems. All right, and so now you know how the grading is going to work. You know the problems I'm going to pick. You won't know the problems until Mr. Jones and I discuss after everything's turned in. So you need to do your work and best on all of them. See ya.